Well, hello there.
Hello, how are you?
I'm better than I was on the weekend.
That's a definitely the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Always go up if possible.
Yeah. Yep. We're
Yeah,
getting there.
yeah. And I took the weekend to recover after the madness from last week. So
I sometimes want to talk about everything how I feel, but at the same time in my head, I'm like, I can't talk about it, and it's best to hide, as if I'm doing something wrong if I talk about things. What if I talk about it and make people feel pity about me or sad? I don't want them to feel that way. And if I start talking, I'd be talking about everything. It's like I'm putting a whole lot of pressure and load onto them. I have said this a million and one times before, and I'm going to say it again. We cannot control how other people perceive us. We can't control how they take the words that we're saying. If you're feeling like you need to unload or you're needing to speak about something, then you have every right to do so. Every single person on this planet has every right to speak their truth. If the person we are speaking our truth to feels like they can't be there for us and hold space for us, then it's their job to say that. It's not your job to guess.
I guess the only thing I'd like to add to it is this: trauma has a weird way of making us sort of internally hit our own mute button. You remember the stream where a couple weeks ago I came out and I started talking about my theory of everything, my
Mm-hmm.
theory of humanity kind of thing. That was a bit of a breakthrough for me because that was the first time I was ever able to share in sort of a public forum just these thoughts that I had, right? And a lot of people would probably look at that VOD or look at that stream and might think to themselves, I don't know why that was so difficult for you to do. All you're talking about is a theory, right? But this is what manic depression does. And this is what trauma does. This is what having things in your head mess with you does. It, in general, makes you feel isolated. It makes you feel alone with your thoughts. And it makes you feel you don't want to put these problems on anyone else. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to burden anyone else with what you're thinking. You don't want to burden anyone else with what you're feeling. I think it kind of goes without saying that part of the reason that Wendigo and I enjoy doing these streams together is because when Wendigo and I have a chance to speak with each other on a personal level, off stream, sometimes it's difficult for us to be able to coordinate when's a good time to talk because we're both going through our own stuff and don't want to unload too much on the other person. It's a respect boundary that we try not to cross in our friendship. And so we know to a large degree what you're going through when it comes to the feelings of being afraid to share, afraid to put it out there, whatever, because you will figure out a way to talk yourself out of it constantly. And we do it too.
Well, and I think something to note too is that, like, I understand my reluctance to want to lean on anybody else is because I was always told, sit down, shut up, your opinion doesn't matter. Why are you so sensitive? Why do you have these feelings? You're being dramatic. It's always something with you. Like all of those really invalidating, degrading comments. And you get told that so much that you start to believe it yourself. And you tell it
Yes.
to yourself all the time. And you go, well, I'm sad. I need to just sit down, shut up, and deal with it on my own. I can't go for support because I'm too much. I'm being dramatic. I'm all of this stuff, right? And it took a
Yeah.
long time for me to get to this point in understanding that no, I'm not being dramatic. I'm not overly emotional. I have big emotions and I feel them intensely. And that's the exact reason why I need to reach out to people. The only job that I have is to make sure that I'm doing it in a respectful way.
I see a lot of good points in chat here too. Boswell saying, this is why I'm often reluctant to vent and feel guilty venting. If you are a kind person, you will inherently feel guilty about taking up someone else's time to talk about yourself. It is a very sort of awful paradox. If you're a type of person who has good intentions, you will inevitably feel bad about taking up time for yourself. It's kind of how it works. Being afraid of telling our friend what we're going through can lead to further issues. Absolutely can. Because if the friend that you're trying to talk to or the person that you want to talk to is somebody who you're saying to yourself, this is the person that I feel safe opening up about this to, and then you prevent yourself from opening up, you're screwing down the lid on the pressure cooker even tighter. If it can't be a friend or a therapist, you have to find some way to be able to vent it. And if you can't do it through voice or through text or whatever else it is, that's when I also recommend to people take walks, work out, breathe, meditate, dance while you're listening to music, whatever you possibly can to help deal with the buildup of that energy. because energy is energy, whether negative or positive.
Thing that I always think to myself is, and I think it stems from my upbringing, is this person I'm speaking to has it worse than me, or someone out there is having a harder time. My dumb shit doesn't matter. That's what I say to myself every time, regardless if I vent or not. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've experienced that tenfold all the time, you know, and it stems from even simple little comments from my parents, like, you know, there's starving kids in Africa, right? You should probably clear your plate. It's sentiments like that, or it's like, why are you crying?
Right.
You've got nothing to cry about. You know, this person over here lost their child, or this person over here doesn't have a leg, so their stuff's more important than yours, you know?
I was talking about this with a friend when we were discussing the concept of generational trauma. We've talked about that a few times before, right? It's the idea that older generations, they had the right sentiments, they had the right idea in mind with what they were trying to convey as an idea, but the communication was completely off. Like, for instance, let's take the clean your plate thing, right? If instead of saying you better clean your plate because there's kids starving in Africa, the better way to have that discussion, or the better way to talk about that sentiment is, hey, if you don't feel like cleaning your plate, let's make sure that we save the leftovers, because I don't want the food to go to waste, because food's expensive. And we're really lucky to have what we have in front of us. We're really advantaged and privileged to have what we have, because there's a lot of people who got born into some place that had no food at all. And see, it's the simple selection of different words and taking 15 more seconds to say something that puts it in a completely different scope.
Well, yeah, because one says, look, maybe we shouldn't waste food. And the other one says, I don't care about your feelings. I don't care that you're full. You need to eat it anyway.
Exactly.
So one invalidates and puts pressure on, and the other one says, hey, maybe this might be the situation.
This is the reason why I have such a hard time with people who just refuse to try, because you begin to see with little examples like this how easy it is to just say what really needs to be said, to make sure that things are just presented in a kinder way, presented in such a way that it's like, you know, this is the reality of the situation, and now let's have a conversation rather than just shouting at someone.
I feel like my upbringing would have been better if it was worded in that way. Maybe I wouldn't have waited so long before getting help. Parents saying, what the fuck have you got to be depressed or sad about? You have all you need. There are homeless people. It was only until my brother attempted suicide before I did they realize it's not always an environmental thing. They still say stuff like this, but they do understand more. And that's the thing about emotional intelligence, right? Like, if your parents were emotionally intelligent enough to word things differently, then maybe we wouldn't have these feelings about the things that they said, or have these beliefs about ourselves because of the things that they said. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, it's just not. Emotional intelligence isn't common, but we're trying to make that common.
It's interesting that you talked about your brother's attempted suicide, because I had a family member, a cousin, there was something kind of similar there. It was like they were in an environment where they had everything that they needed, but it was due to a combination of depression and other unrealized mental health, / environmental factors that led to this just kind of breaking point for my cousin. He followed through, unfortunately. One of the things that I learned during my younger years, it taught me about why I wanted to be able to understand the intricacies of people and their brains and their personalities so intimately. It made me think to myself that this stuff is avoidable. There has to be a better way to discuss this stuff. There has to be a better way to handle this. How are you, Wendigo?
How am I? I am exhausted. I am needing a change of scenery, not feeling as in despair as I was on Saturday. I took quite a lot of time actually on Saturday to just sit in my car and cry and just get it out. I was fucking struggling, feeling very alone, and all of these problems are just my own. But I cried it out. And actually, for the first time ever, something happened that had me feeling very loved. I reached out to my girlfriend and I said, I'm fucking struggling. I need help. Like, I don't want to be alone right now. And she's like, Kate, dropped everything she was doing, and she came and she picked me up and walked up to me and didn't say a word, just gave me the biggest hug. And that's not something nobody's ever done that for me before. I'd reach out for help and they'd go, either they wouldn't respond, which, is fine, or just, it's gonna be okay, or, all of that stuff, but wouldn't actually do anything tangible. And it was heartwarming, and I love this woman to pieces. It has me feeling like fucking finally, somebody can hold me in the way that I hold everybody else. She's a real one. But it's not that I don't hold it against anybody that they can't do that for me. You know, everybody's got their own lives and their own stuff and aren't capable of it, or, you know, and I don't ever judge anybody for that, but it just was really nice to have that reciprocated, you know? Yeah, my heart is full.